Today, we're going to talk about the strategy and the challenges of hunting a small parcel.
Bob, why'd you wait till the middle of the rut to cut up that tree that's been laying in your field all summer?
What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to the subscribers, and if you're new here, welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. So number one on this list is going to be coordinating with your neighbors. On a small parcel, your neighbors are a lot closer, so your relationships with them end up being a little bit more important than they are on a large parcel. Now, on a large parcel, having good relationships with your neighbors is also a good thing, so don't just discard that just because you have a lot of land. But on a smaller parcel, it's a lot more important. So you really do want to have an open line of communication with your neighbors. Just get an idea of like how they're going to use their land during the hunting season. Do they see their land as more of a recreational property? Are they also a hunter? Just, you're going to have to do your best to coordinate with them. Try to explain to them that like, hey, the rut is this time of year. I'm trying to hunt this time of year. I'm also trying to hunt the backside of these cold fronts that come through. If you can give me just these couple of days, I don't really care what you're doing on your property after that. And of course they can say no. It is of course their land. They own that land just as much as you have the right to hunt your property or the one that you have access to. So you can't get mad at them. But now if they are a hunter, I know a lot of guys have this like sense of competition, and rightfully so. I mean, we like to compete, but don't let it take you to a place where you're like emotionally upset, like mad about it. And I think a lot of guys get to this point because they maybe have like a target buck. So if you have a target buck, like, I don't like that term target buck. I know some guys really are like, this is the only buck I'm going to shoot. You're going to see a lot more success in the woods if you broaden that out a little bit. So I always like to target like a percentage of my bucks. So once you have your trail cameras out there, you get a good idea of all the bucks that are on your property. I have other videos on like how to scout with your trail cameras or whatever. You guys can go look those up if you don't know what I'm talking about here. But you can really like figure out what your buck herd is on your property and which bucks you have a good chance at. Those ones that are showing up at like midnight, 1, 2 a.m., you're not going to have a very good shot at them. So don't set those as your target buck. I see that on social media all the time, and I'm just feel bad for those guys because they're going to sit all season and never pull the trigger. But what you do want to do is like target that percentage. And so be that the top 10%, 20%, 25%, top 50%, whatever you want on your land, go for that. You're going to see success more times year after year after year. Now, the other thing is everybody's not a headhunter. Now, I do typically headhunt my bow tag a lot more than my gun tag simply because of the length of season. But there's guys out there that don't want to eat tag soup, and I understand that completely. My family absolutely loves venison, so there's a lot of times that, that gun season's ticking down, and I am blessed to have a property that we primarily gun hunt and a property that primarily is bow hunted. So the idea of like letting one go and grow on that gun property isn't necessarily really doing anything for us, because especially because that's our northwestern Wisconsin property. The winters are so harsh up there. Literally any one of those bucks could succumb to the exposure and the predation up there during the winter, and you're not necessarily going to see that buck next year just because he couldn't make it through the winter anyway. But we'll have that where like maybe you do start gun season a little bit up here, and then a date comes through and another day, and you're running out of days, and that percentage of the buck population you're hunting maybe grows a little bit because simply you don't want to eat tag soup. Now, there's always the option to shoot does and such, and there's a time and place for that as well. But some guys are venison hunters, and I totally understand that. But make sure you are talking to your neighbors. Understand what their harvest goals are. Understand what your harvest goals are. If you're all hunters, share those trail cam videos and photos and whatever. Understand kind of what the deer herd is doing. You're going to understand a lot better what your deer herd's doing if you can communicate with your neighbors if they are a hunter, because you'll understand where they're going during the day, during the night, etc. You'll understand which deer you have a better shot at that way too once you learn how to do this. So number two, and this is probably the most important tip on a small parcel, is you cannot overhunt and oversit it. So what ends up happening on a small parcel is it is only so big, and it can end up being a deer sanctuary. We're going to get into how to create that later in this video. But once you've established that, you have all of these deer coming to this small parcel. You cannot screw that up. So if you hunt it in the wrong wind, you're too noisy getting in and out of there, you're just not hunting it on your best probability days, you have a good chance of screwing up this small parcel, and you're going to just completely blast it out and send these deer into somebody else's parcel. So we can't do that, because on a small parcel, you don't have the option to go hunt somewhere else. This is the only small area you have. So once you blow it out, you're done. You got to come back a couple weeks later. If it's like one of those really old bucks, he's probably gone for the season. He's smart enough to say, nope, I'm not going back there. I know this other area. These bucks have that huge, like 3-mile home range on average. He has another place in mind that he can go run off to when all of a sudden he sees you, hears you, smells you coming into this little sanctuary on this small parcel. So definitely make sure you are paying attention to your hunter ingress and egress. Make sure, if you have the opportunity, clear out anything out of that trail that you walk in and out of. There shouldn't be any sticks laying in it for you to step on and snap. There shouldn't be any grasses growing that like brush against your leg. For one, that's noise, but for two, that means you're leaving extra scent out in the woods. And I don't care how many products you're using, you cannot eliminate your scent completely. And if you're brushing up against all of this stuff to get into that stand, that's all that extra scent that is staying out in the woods. And that brush scent is a lot stinkier than just your scent lofting off into the woods with the wind, because that disperses as it leaves you. Now, that being said, we also want to make sure that we're taking care of our scent, not only on stand, but on our walk in and out. You know, watch what that weather says it's going to do. There's some great weather apps out there that will tell you wind direction and wind speed from time to time. So from hour to hour. So you can look what it is on your walk in, on your walk out. Make sure that wind isn't going to be painting out into like a bedding area as you're walking in for a PM sit. Make sure that wind's not painting into a feeding area on your walk out from a PM sit, and so on and so forth. Now, we also have to keep in mind what our thermals are doing. So in the morning, as the day is heating up, you're technically going to have your thermals going up. So your scent's going to be carried up with it. This is why a lot of my morning stands are set up high. If you have topography, like on the top of a hill or on a ridge or something, where your thermals are just going to be carried up and out, and you don't have to worry about wind direction so much, because the thermals are carrying your scent completely up and out of the area, that the wind direction is just blowing it straight over the deer. You don't even have to worry about it getting like blown down at them. Now, in the afternoon, thermals are coming down, temperatures coming down. Your scent is going to drop down from where you are sitting and drop down into a hole wherever, and that's where it's going to sit. So just keep in mind these thermals, keep in mind this wind direction, keep in mind how you're getting in and out of these stands, and you make sure you're only hunting these high probability days, these days that are right after a cold front. During the rut, you can do your all day sits. Of course, a deer will be wherever during the rut. It's the most consistently inconsistent time of the year. All of the strategy we put into the rest of the season doesn't even matter during the rut, because the bucks are just wherever that time of year, and they do move more. That's why a lot of guys talk about the rut. But I like to not completely focus my entire season around the rut, because it's such a small percentage of the overall season. So next on the list is smart stand placement and smart ingress and egress. So we talked about how to like maintain those ingress and egresses, making sure you're not bumping into anything on your way in. But when we're setting up these stand locations, we want to make sure we're keeping in mind everything I just talked about. So don't just put a stand in an area because there's a scrape under there or because it's where two trails come together. Make sure you're putting these stands where you can get in and out of them undetected without any deer in the area knowing you're even there, and especially when you're on stand also, of course. So you can also take advantage of setting up multiple stands. So if you are hunting over something like a food source or a major travel corridor, a pinch point, a funnel, whatever, you can put two stands up on either side of these attractions, so that depending on what the wind is, you can sit in this one or that one and idealize your hunt. So these are good things to keep in mind. This stuff's a lot easier on private land. On public land, it's a lot harder to carry two stands in and out, obviously. But if you guys are carrying more of a portable stand, you obviously set up on the side of the attraction that is ideal for the current wind and thermals of that time. And then again, just make sure you're keeping track of that egress line of movement, your line of movement coming in and out of that location. Sometimes, actually most times, taking the direct path to where the stand is not the best path to take. Sometimes we walk very far to make sure we don't bust out specific areas of the property, to get around the edges. Maybe we go down an open area like edge of a field, or we get into like down a dirt road, or we get into some other access point where the deer typically aren't, in order to avoid busting out those thicker areas of the woods. Speaking of those thicker areas of the woods, we get into the fourth thing, and that is, so if you are on private land, what you want to develop on this small parcel is the best food source in the area and the best cover in the area. But we're talking about the best fall focused food and the best fall focused cover. So we really don't care what the deer are doing in the summer, what they're doing in the spring, and we kind of do care about what they're doing in the winter, just because we want to get them through the toughest part of the year if we are in these northern areas, especially if we're in that snow belt from like Duluth to Buffalo along the Great Lakes there, because we do want to help them through the winter so that we have a chance at seeing them next year. But that's not always something that's feasible to do. But if we're 100% focused on the hunting season, we want to be focused on what is going to be the best food and cover for them during the time of year that we can actually hunt them. And so how we do this is, of course, with food plots. We also can establish shrubs, woody browse, things of that nature. Keep those oak trees in there so those acorns are dropping down. Those are kind of unpredictable to hunt because obviously the acorns drop at different times every year. The amount of acorns that drop are different every year. And then how fast they get eaten up by all the critters is different every year. So it's a variable that is too hard to predict. So I like using things like food plots. Obviously, if you're in an area that you can bait, you can use a feeder, you can use a bait pile, whatever. Those things will also work. Although I have found that bucks will typically avoid those corn piles because they're too crowded with does, especially in the Northwoods. I know other parts of the country it's a little different, but in the Northwoods, you put out one little bait pile, we're restricted on how many gallons of bait can go in it and how big it can be, and of course that just congregates all of the does and fawns on top of it, and those bucks just go find somewhere else to feed, which is typically a food plot. So put in those food plots if you can, guys. It is definitely worth the work. I have other videos on how you can maximize those and all of that, but you definitely want to have the best cover, the best food in your area. To get the best cover, what we want to do is, if you're in the big woods, get in there, get some trees on the ground, open up that canopy so that sunlight can get down to that forest floor and let all of that stuff start to grow up. So there's all of those dormant seeds and maybe some of those subordinate plants, shrubs, whatever, that are having their sunlight blocked by those big trees. Once their leaves can hit sunlight, you got to keep in mind that plants and trees, their leaves are like solar panels. So like if you block the sun from a solar panel, it doesn't draw in much energy. It's not going to power very much. So if you have these small trees and shrubs and whatever that are having their leaves blocked out by that big high canopy of those big trees, they can't have the power to grow and build and produce down at the level that the deer actually live at. The deer do not care if there is a big canopy above their heads. They care about what's down here. And so if you can make everything down here grow by taking out everything up there, you are going to have a lot more deer down here. Deer will always go to the thickest part of the woods, especially during the fall hunting season. That's where we always find them when we're hunting. So if you can create that on your property, you are going to have a perfect small parcel, especially if you have better food and better cover than all of your neighbors. It doesn't matter how many acres they have. So lastly, number 5, we're going to talk about trail cameras. Now on a small parcel, I would highly recommend using cell cameras, because the more you go onto the property to check cameras, and this applies to any size property anywhere you're hunting, but the more you go on just to check your cameras, just to see what's on the property, the more scent you're leaving out there, the more noise you're leaving out there, the more chance they have to see you while you're out there. So you don't want to go on a property just to check a camera, but it makes it difficult to strategize your hunt without being able to see what is on the cameras. So cell cameras are a thing that exists. I highly recommend using them. I will link the ones that I use down below. I have tried so many different brands of cell cameras and they just have not either been able to connect, haven't sent high quality photos, this, that, and the next thing. The ones I use now are not one of the big name brand ones. I kind of stumbled on these, but they send great pictures. They send them often, however often you would like, and they're actually like really good quality. They're actually capturing all of the photos. The funny thing is in order to prove that these other brands, and I'm not going to burn them here, to prove that those other brands weren't taking pictures, weren't catching every photo of all the movement in front of them, I actually used this brand that I'll link below to set and look at those cameras so that I could see that there were deer standing right in front of the cameras and the other brand were not taking pictures. So go check them out. They're down below. And if you absolutely want to keep pressure off of these small parcels, these are what you're going to need. And if you guys feel like you got some value out of this video, please go hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you like this video, YouTube thinks you're going to like this one. Otherwise, go check out this one. That one's pretty cool too. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.